Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are strapping in for a pretty intensive exploration. We're looking at physical infrastructure, but in this decentralized digital world, we're focusing squarely on Linkspreed's massive, and I mean really ambitious consumer electronics initiative, WYNIX.
That's right. And for those of you following Linkspreed, you probably know they're serious, really serious, about building what they see as the next generation of the internet. They call it Web4.
Right.
But this deep dive, it isn't just about the software side of things. The mission today is, well, to understand not just what WYNIX is building, this whole family of devices, phones, rings, smart glasses, the works, but why? Why is physical hardware so essential to actually making their digital vision happen?
Okay, so let's maybe unpack this whole ecosystem idea first, because Linkspreed isn't just offering a service here. They seem to be building a whole foundational structure.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Our sources, they paint this picture of a fully integrated ecosystem, right? Where basically every digital interaction is unified somehow. It sounds like creating a new digital society almost from the ground up.
Absolutely. And this ecosystem, it's anchored by something they call W4OS. That's social networks as a service.
Okay.
Yeah. And this initiative is really crucial because the idea is to remove these massive technical barriers that right now stop brands or communities, or maybe even just individuals, from building and, importantly, easily managing their own social networks, autonomous ones, decentralized ones.
Wow.
And that capability, that SNEDIS, it really lays the groundwork, the literal groundwork, for the decentralized digital society they're aiming for.
So if the SNEDIS is kind of like the blueprint, the architecture, where do people, where do users actually interact with it? They must need some kind of window, right? A single place to access all this potential.
That's exactly where the Project Super App comes in. The Super App is, it's vital for actually getting people on board and making it usable.
Makes sense.
The goal is essentially to dramatically simplify your digital life. It pulls together the core functions: communication, financial tools, creative platforms, even this emerging Trive universe they talk about.
Which sounds like their own sort of integrated identity or metaverse layer.
Pretty much, yeah. Their specific take on it. Yeah. And all these functions, they have to be seamlessly integrated into one single intuitive interface. Right. So you've got the decentralized core, the SNOS, and then this elegant centralized access point, the Super App.
Okay, a decentralized core, centralized access. Interesting tension there. And if all that wasn't ambitious enough, they're also building the hardware to run it all. Why? I mean, couldn't they just make their software work on, existing iPhones or Android devices? Things easier?
Well, they could, theoretically. But to make this integrated experience truly seamless, and maybe more importantly, truly decentralized, they realized they just couldn't rely on hardware that was built for, the Web 2 giants.
So this whole business model is centralized, right?
Right.
Exactly. Fundamentally centralized. Linkspreed needed devices that were optimized not just for viewing content, but for actually hosting it. Which brings us, directly to the star of today's deep dive, WYNIX.
Okay, so let's really dig into the strategic shift then, because it's significant. Linkspreed starts off building this incredibly complex software, Web4 protocols, the Trive universe, fancy AI integrations, and then they make this really expensive, really demanding pivot to building consumer electronics.
Yeah.
WYNIX is the initiative born from that realization.
Okay.
So why the hardware imperative? Isn't it way easier to build new software today than ever before?
It absolutely is. And that's precisely their stated rationale, which is actually quite insightful when you think about it.
How so?
Well, our sources really emphasize that the competitive landscape for software development, it's changed drastically. Thanks to advanced AI-powered tools, sophisticated workflows, a startup, a small team even, can genuinely develop, iterate, and deploy pretty good software applications, platforms almost overnight, as they put it. Right. The barrier to entry for just pure software is collapsing.
It really is. So if everyone can build great software quickly, where's the sustainable advantage? Where's the moat?
Okay. So it shifts somewhere else.
It shifts, in their view, to vertical integration and control over the entire user experience. Linkspreed realized that to build this genuinely radical next-gen ecosystem, one that needs fundamentally different security, different data hosting capabilities, they needed control from the metal up. As they define it, a fully integrated ecosystem simply needs the appropriate physical infrastructure.
That makes a lot of sense. If you're building this whole new operating system, W4OS, which is designed specifically for decentralization, You can't just trust standard devices to coordinate perfectly with your, I don't know, your specific networking stack or your security elements.
Exactly right. Traditional devices, they're optimized for pulling data from the cloud. Linkspreed is focused on devices that are, this is their phrase, perfectly coordinated with the software. They're optimizing the physical devices to be efficient hosts and nodes on a network, not just viewers or clients. And this ensures that seamless, frictionless user experience that the super app promises.
Yeah.
But it also, crucially, lets them hardwire their security protocols right down at the chipset level.
Which you just can't do on a standard off-the-shelf OS.
Generally, no, not to the same degree.
So WYNIX isn't just building electronics, they're building these like specialized containers that are optimized for their software, the W4OS, which we know is a custom fork, right? A custom version of Android.
A custom ROM, yeah.
What does customizing that Android fork actually let them do, technically speaking?
Oh, that customization is absolutely vital. Standard Android, or iOS for that matter, it tightly controls how resources are allocated, network access, background processes, and usually it favors applications that talk to centralized services. That's just how it's built. By forking the OS, by creating W4OS, Linkspreed can do several key things. First, they get much lower level access to security elements. This lets them implement truly decentralized authentication methods, stuff that's just harder or impossible otherwise.
Right.
Second, and this is crucial for that whole server in your pocket idea, they can custom tune the kernel, the core of the OS, and the networking stacks. They can make it really efficient at running distributed processes, hosting databases, things like that, right there on mobile architecture, which normally phones aren't really designed to do continuously.
Gotcha. And their philosophy, their guiding principles for this hardware seem to center on three core ideas.
Yes. WYNIX's mission, as they state it, is about building consumer electronics defined by being accessible, powerful, and privacy-focused. They're designing the physical container, the device itself, to fundamentally match the decentralized contents of Web 4. The form follows the function, you could say.
Accessible, powerful, privacy-focused. Okay. And this is where we connect the hardware straight back to that philosophical core of Web 4 decentralization. We keep seeing this critical term, hardware on the edge. What does that actually mean in practical terms, and why is it so essential for Linkspreed?
Right. Hardware on the edge. It's the strategic move that basically flips the traditional internet structure on its head. Instead of relying on these massive centralized data centers, which are expensive, vulnerable to censorship, single points of failure, and they inherently compromise user economy.
Because your data isn't yours, really.
Exactly. Linkspreed is pushing computing power and the infrastructure itself out to the very edge, the periphery of the network, closer to the user, onto the physical device itself.
So that significantly decentralizes computing power, and theoretically it enhances security too, right? Because your data isn't all sitting in one giant honeypot just waiting for someone to exploit it.
Precisely. That's the idea. Linkspreed's vision is that these physical devices, the WYNIX hardware, they are absolutely essential for achieving that future goal of a free, decentralized, and independent social network-based internet.
Wow.
If the underlying architecture of Web 4 is designed to be fundamentally independent, well, the device has to be capable of supporting that independence. It has to be the hosting environment.
So the phone, it stops being just a communication tool. It becomes a vital, sort of self-contained node in this huge decentralized network.
That's the leap. That's the core concept. It transforms the consumer product, the smartphone you hold in your hand, into essential cell-phone infrastructure.
Okay, let's look at the actual hardware then, the stuff that makes this happen, starting with the W4 phones. The sources talk about two initial generations, right, both running on this custom W4OS. And it seems like they started with accessibility as a really primary driver.
And that's a really key piece of their strategic positioning, I think. The W4 phone Gen 1, they're branding it the People's Smart Device, which is a direct, pretty aggressive challenge to the current market. It focuses squarely on affordability. The goal is to make sure this whole decentralization thing isn't just for people who can drop, $1,000 or more on a flagship phone.
Yeah, the stated target price point is, it's kind of remarkable, especially given the huge technical ambition of the ecosystem they're building around it. They said the price will be not higher than $200.
Right.
Sub $200. That really does make Web 4 potentially accessible to a massive global audience, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. But, this also requires us to put on our critical thinking hats for a moment.
Okay.
Achieving global scale hardware production, managing the supply chain, distribution, all at a sub $200 price point, especially for a company that's relatively new to this specific sector. That's a monumental logistical challenge.
Yeah.
It requires just immense efficiency, tight cost control.
So how might a company like Linkspreed even approach that logistical mountain? Are they talking about the risks, how they'll manage it?
Well, our sources don't give us the detailed supply chain contracts, obviously, but the strategy itself implies several key ways they might control costs. First, by using that custom Android fork, W4OS, they can strip out a lot of unnecessary software overhead.
Right, stuff you pay licensing for, maybe.
Exactly, or just bloat. And they can optimize for lower cost, specifically chosen components, rather than paying premiums for big brand names inside the phone. Second, they're likely prioritizing the stuff that's core functionality for Web 4. The networking chips, decent storage, processing efficiency for hosting tasks, maybe over things like luxury materials or top-of-the-line camera systems, which often drive up flagship prices.
So focus on the mission-critical Web 4 stuff, less on the bells and whistles that make current flagships so expensive.
That seems to be the approach. It ensures that the vision, the decentralization, isn't immediately gatekept by a prohibitive device cost.
Okay, so that makes Gen 1 the essential low-cost entry point. You said the prototype currently runs Android 14.
Yeah, the early ones we've seen mentioned run Android 14, but the clear plan, the roadmap, is to evolve it fully onto their own W4OS. That's what allows for that deeper, specialized software integration that really enables the whole ecosystem to function as designed.
Gotcha. And that brings us to the W4 phone Gen 2, which is where, I guess, the philosophical distinction gets really radical and the hardware claims just jump dramatically.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't just a slightly better phone, it's marketed as the enterprise powerhouse. And it seems like it completely changes the definition of what a mobile device even is.
It really does. It pushes the boundary.
The specs they're talking about for Gen 2 are, well, they're staggering for a consumer device, let alone a phone.
They really are. They are planning, apparently, to ship this device with a massive capacity of 16 gigabytes of RAM.
16 gigs.
And 1 terabyte of storage, local storage.
Wow. Compare that to, many high-end phones today. They might top out at 8, maybe 12 gigs of RAM. And they often rely heavily on cloud services instead of massive local storage.
Exactly. On a traditional smartphone, those Gen 2 specs would feel like complete overkill. Unnecessary.
So why? Why does a phone need that kind of storage and memory? You're not just storing, vacation photos and cat videos on a whole terabyte of space, surely.
Absolutely not. I mean, you could, but that's not the point. The necessity of those really high specs is directly tied to Linkspreed's decentralization vision. It's not just about storage space. It's about resource allocation for processing.
Ah, okay.
They envision the device acting like a single server. That's the concept. Capable of running multiple applications, hosting live databases, all simultaneously, right there on the phone.
Okay, hang on. Think about the technical demands of that. Running a decentralized social network graph, maybe? Or a localized AI model processing data on the device?
Precisely. That means the RAM, the 16 gigs, isn't just for switching quickly between Netflix and your email app. It's required for things like operating system resource isolation, keeping processes separate and secure, maybe running virtualized environments, and definitely managing network traffic for external requests if it's acting as a server.
And the terabyte of storage.
It's required not just for your personal files, your photos and music, but for the local databases the hosted applications need, the log files they generate, maybe the necessary blockchain or distributed ledger infrastructure that's required to maintain whatever network you're hosting or participating in. It needs space for the system and the user.
So the ultimate capability they're building towards, and they're clear this is for the future, right? Not available right now.
Correct. It's aspirational at this stage.
Is the ability for users to potentially host their own full social network directly on the device. That just sounds revolutionary. But what are the engineering challenges? That sounds incredibly difficult on a phone.
Oh, the challenges are immense.
Yeah.
Absolutely immense. First one that jumps out, battery life.
Right. Servers usually stay plugged in.
Exactly. Running server operations, especially things like continuous network connections, heavy CPU, or even GPU usage for local AI processing. That drains power incredibly quickly. Linkspreed has to optimize W4OS extensively, finding ways to put the server environment into very low power states efficiently, but without compromising network availability when someone needs to connect.
Yeah.
That's a tough balancing act. Okay, battery, what else? Heat dissipation. Server chips generate heat, sometimes a lot of it. Standard mobile phone bodies, they're just not designed for continuous high-load operations like a server might demand. So they must have implemented some pretty advanced passive cooling, maybe even active cooling solutions, though that seems less likely in a phone form factor. But whatever they do, it adds complexity and cost.
And then there's just the market itself, right? Even with these monster specs, they're trying to break into a market totally dominated by Apple and Google, who control the OS ecosystem, the app stores, the distribution models.
That's the huge market risk, isn't it? The quote-unquote app gap. Linkspreed has to convince developers, third parties, to build Web4 native applications specifically optimized for W4OS.
What's the incentive for developers to do that?
Well, the incentive, presumably, is the autonomy. The ability for those developers to control their application's hosting environment directly on the user's device. They get to bypass centralized cloud fees, avoid potential censorship risks associated with big platforms. That's the pitch, anyway.
Okay. And even in the prototype phase, the physical differences between the phones are interesting. You mentioned they shared an unboxing video.
Yeah, of the second-generation prototype. They made it public, which they highlighted as part of their commitment to transparency.
That is unusual for hardware companies, usually very secretive.
It aligns with that Web4 ethos, doesn't it, being open. And a key difference they pointed out between the Gen 1 and Gen 2 prototypes was that the Gen 2 box included a pencil, like a stylus. It seems like a small detail, but it really underscores that the Gen 2 is specifically being designed as this powerful device for professionals, for power users, the kind of people who will actually leverage those server capabilities, not just for basic communication, but as a genuine portable workspace and, an edge computing server. It's like their version of a desktop replacement laptop, but shrunk down.
Okay, so WYNIX is clearly way more than just a phone brand then. The phone, especially Gen 2, is the central piece of this whole server in your pocket philosophy. But a true ecosystem, it needs integration across multiple points where users interact with it, right?
Absolutely. Can't just be the phone.
So let's transition to the other devices they're talking about, the ones that complete this integrated experience. And they're all designed, presumably, for seamless W4OS integration.
That's the plan. So we move next to the W4 book, which is their take on a laptop. And even though it's still in the conceptual phase, the design goal is clearly to take that edge computing philosophy from the phone and apply it to a larger, more powerful, portable workspace. They're aiming to sort of redefine what a portable computer fundamentally does within this decentralized network.
So what are the conceptual features that make the W4 book Web 4 native? Beyond just running the W4OS, I mean.
Well, they promise the seamless W4OS integration, obviously. They talk about all-day battery life, which is table stakes now.
Yeah.
But interestingly, they also mention a convertible and modular design.
Modular? How so?
The modularity is key, yeah. It suggests users could potentially upgrade or customize certain components themselves, maybe storage, maybe specialized security modules, things like that, which again emphasizes user autonomy over a totally locked down experience like you get with many laptops today.
Okay, interesting. But the killer feature, like philosophically speaking, seems to be its function as a decentralized asset.
Exactly. That's the big one. The W4 book is designed, conceptually, to transform into a public server whenever it's connected to power and online.
Wow, okay, hold on. A public server, my laptop.
That's the idea. It's an immense commitment to building the actual infrastructure of Web 4. It means your personal laptop, when you're not actively using it yourself, maybe when it's plugged in overnight, becomes a functional part of the public network's backbone, contributing resources.
That's a really dramatic expansion of the concept we just talked about with the phone being a personal server. So when I open my W4 book, connect to Wi-Fi, I'm not just accessing the decentralized internet, I'm actively contributing processing power and storage capacity to it.
That's the vision.
Okay, but what are the ethical and technical safeguards needed there? When a personal device transforms into a public server, that sounds risky.
It requires incredibly stringent resource isolation. Absolutely critical. The system, the W4OS, must clearly partition the user's private data and their personal resources from the publicly available server resources, completely separate.
Like a virtual wall. Essentially, yeah.
All right.
Technically, the W4OS has to manage any public traffic, any processing requests coming from the network in a totally contained, sandboxed environment that absolutely cannot access the user's core files or private data.
Okay.
And, this also opens up questions about incentives. Why would users contribute their hardware resources like this? Linkspreed might need to figure out mechanisms for fair compensation, maybe through tokens or community recognition, something like that, though our sources don't really detail a specific mechanism yet.
Right. But it dramatically extends that decentralization idea. Every user with a W4 book potentially becomes a functional part of the network's infrastructure.
Yeah.
It moves beyond just having your own personal server to actively supporting the whole community's infrastructure.
It really is the difference between just self-sufficiency and a kind of communal responsibility baked right into the hardware design itself.
Okay. So from the largest piece of portable hardware, the book, let's go to maybe the most discreet, persistent, the W4 Smart Ring.
This feels like where the ecosystem ensures that seamless, authenticated, day-to-day interaction. If the W4 book is doing heavy lifting as a public node sometimes, maybe the W4 ring ensures the user's identity stays secure across all those different decentralized nodes.
That's an excellent connection to make.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Smart Ring really focuses on intelligence at your fingertip, quite literally. It's designed to be this discreet but powerful companion device, and its primary role seems to be acting as a persistent, low-power token for authentication and identity management.
So what functions does it actually serve in this decentralized world? Is it just like other smart rings?
Well, beyond the kind of features you might anticipate now, advanced health metrics, getting discrete notifications, maybe NFC for access or contactless payments.
Right.
Its most powerful role in the Web4 context is likely that continuous low-power authentication piece. Think about it. In a decentralized world, you're constantly interacting with different self-hosted nodes, different services run by different people or groups. You need a highly secure, but also non-distracting way to constantly prove you are who you say you are.
Without pulling out your phone every 5 seconds.
Exactly. The ring probably manages your cryptographic keys, maybe uses biometrics, and continuously verifies your presence or identity, basically eliminating the need to constantly enter passwords or use your phone for simple authentications across the entire Web4 SNOS landscape.
Okay, so it sounds like the W4 Smart Ring is kind of the always-on sensor array for your Web4 identity, keeping you connected and authenticated without the friction of having to interact with the screen all the time.
Precisely. It's designed to be a stylish, comfortable piece of tech that manages your digital life subtly, making that whole Web4 experience feel truly ambient, truly seamless.
And finally, the most immersive piece of hardware in the collection, the W4 Smart Glasses.
Yeah.
If the phone is the server and the ring is the persistent identity, the glasses are the new interface, offering this new vision for reality, as they put it, the ultimate link between the digital and the physical.
Yeah, they represent the interface for what people call ambient computing. The glasses are being designed specifically to offer augmented reality or AR display experiences.
So information overlaid on the real world.
Exactly. This is where that Trive universe, their integrated metaverse layer we mentioned, could really come to life, overlaying intelligent, persistent information directly onto your view of the physical world. Contextual information right where you need it.
And how does that connect back to the super app concept, managing all your stuff?
Well, the glasses would allow for completely hands-free access to your AI assistant and hands-free communication too. Imagine accessing your finance tools, your communication apps, your creative platforms, everything in the super app just by, say, looking at a real-world object or using a simple voice command.
And the information just appears in your vision.
Right. Rendered immediately via the augmented reality display. They also mention an integrated camera and audio naturally, which means seamless, natural, hands-free interaction with the entire Web4 ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's the device that could make that whole super app concept truly ambient, wrapping the digital world around you naturally instead of you having to constantly look down at a screen.
Okay, so if we zoom out now, look at the whole picture, this entire WYNIX portfolio, it really isn't just a random collection of gadgets, is it? It feels like a unified, vertically integrated family of products.
Absolutely.
Linkspreed is clearly trying to build the whole integrated experience, leveraging that W4OS and the super app across all these different devices, the phone, the book, the ring, the glasses.
That is absolutely the cohesive vision they're presenting. This hardware, taken together, is meant to ensure a secure and seamless experience across their entire ecosystem. The W4OS is the critical operating layer that ties everything together. It ensures that your data, which might be hosted on your personal server, your Gen 2 phone, or your W4 book, is securely accessible and continuously authenticated through any WYNIX touchpoint you use, maybe especially using the Smart Ring for that constant verification.
And strategically, this huge, comprehensive hardware push, it seems designed to promote new ways of communication in like two really profound systematic ways.
Right, I think that's fair to say. First, it focuses on lowering the technical barriers, both to entry and access. The Web4OS, as we discussed, allows pretty much anyone to launch their own network without needing to be a server admin expert. And the Gen 1 phone's incredibly low price point, that sub-$200 target, aims to ensure that accessing those new networks, participating in this new digital society, is potentially universal, or at least much more accessible, regardless of your economic status.
Okay, so lowering barriers is one. And the second way, which feels like the really revolutionary part, is that it fundamentally enables decentralized self-hosting for the masses.
That's the real power shift, isn't it? By putting the infrastructure, the actual server, directly into the hands of the consumer via that Gen 2 phone and the W4 book, Linkspreed is, at least in theory, empowering the end user with potentially absolute data and network autonomy.
We really have to consider what this truly means for you, the listener, the potential user.
Yeah.
When you actually move the infrastructure to the edge like this, to your own device, what you need applications or services suddenly become possible. Things that are fundamentally impossible, or at least very difficult, in the centralized cloud environment we all use today.
Well, we can definitely speculate on the kinds of unique applications that true self-hosting enables. Imagine, for example, social networks driven by highly localized personal AI.
Okay, how would that work?
Instead of some centralized algorithm controlled by a giant corporation dictating everything you see based on tracking everyone, imagine your phone's personal server running an AI that's trained only on your interactions, your stated interests, your social graph, all hosted locally and privately.
So the AI learns about me, but the data never leaves my phone.
Potentially, yes. This personalized AI could curate your content, suggest connections, filter information, without ever sending your sensitive preference data or behavior patterns to a central cloud server for analysis. It's private by design.
That completely transforms the user, doesn't it?
Yep.
From just being a consumer of services to being, well, an infrastructure manager, an autonomous data controller.
Absolutely. It promotes massive user autonomy. Think smaller scale, too. You could potentially host and maintain a small, highly secure, maybe even uncensorable community network just for your close family, or a small group of colleagues for a project, directly on your Gen 2 phone.
Without needing any external service provider.
Exactly. That capability enables totally unique community features, maybe hyperlocal services, and it ensures an independence that's just impossible when you rely on centralized cloud services, which can, change their terms of service overnight, deplatform users, or simply shut down a server farm affecting thousands.
And they've also really emphasized transparency throughout this, haven't they? Sharing details about prototypes like that Gen 2 phone unboxing, having open development discussions.
Yes, and that transparency connects the hardware development process right back to those core Web4 principles of openness and decentralization. It helps ensure the user base, the community, feels involved and invested in the development of the very tools they'll eventually use to build this new internet.
So the entire WYNIX portfolio, it's kind of the physical embodiment, the delivery mechanism for this whole new form of decentralized digital society they envision.
That's a great way to put it. They're creating the tools, the hardware infrastructure, that they believe will enable mass adoption of individual digital autonomy. Hashtag outro. The scope of Linkspreed's ambition here, expressed through WYNIX, it's just, it's vast.
Yeah.
And frankly, highly aggressive. It's really not simply about building slightly better devices than what's out there now.
No, it seems much bigger than that.
It's about designing the specific physical tools, everything from an incredibly accessible, potentially sub-$200 phone, all the way up to sophisticated augmented reality glasses that are functionally required to actually run what they see as the next generation of the internet, Web 4. They're defining this hardware on the edge concept as a functional reality, trying to ensure the physical world, the devices, and the operating systems are perfectly aligned with the decentralized principles of their software vision.
All right, so here's where it gets really interesting, I think. And maybe something for you, the listener, to mull over as you consider the true nature of this potential power shift. If your smartphone, your W4 phone Gen 2, is truly a personal server, a pocket-sized piece of edge infrastructure capable of hosting its own social network or running its own highly localized AI, what unique or entirely new application would you launch on that device? An application that fundamentally must operate locally on your device, maybe to protect its data or to function purely independent of the centralized cloud. Think about that autonomy. What would you build if you had it? because that seems to be the true revolutionary promise of what WYNIX is aiming for.
That's a powerful thought to end on, definitely. It really requires us to reevaluate the very purpose of the phone or the computer in our hand. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the future, potentially, of decentralized hardware.
We'll catch you on the next one.